Okay. I think we should do a little draft talk, Cody, as we get 1 week closer. Was it not kind of weird that Jason Beck, all the respect in the world for what he does, never met the guy, obviously, but he put out, I thought it was really random that the team reporter put out a sources say the Tigers worked out Max Clark as we're approaching the draft in a couple weeks, and I think that got people. Uh, I think that triggered some PTSD in
Mhm.
regards to taking any high schooler uh, sort of randomly, I guess you could say, not the one that would be expected to be there. Uh, that was kind of weird. But I guess they're just doing their due. They should be working him out. But I'm saying
Yeah, I
Jason
was gonna
Beck putting it
say
out there.
I don't think this is anything. It was a little odd in that the um Tigers had their media entrance open like an hour later than normal, and they didn't really tell us why that day. Well, it's because they were working out Max Clark, so it seemed like they were trying to keep it under wraps. But then the team reporter ends up reporting it. I don't know the exact dynamics of what went on there. Also, don't really know why they were trying to keep it under wraps. Like all these players or all these teams are
Of course, you're
working
working
out
him out.
top players. Like I don't think it is much of a thing at all. To me, I'm glad to know they are at least keeping a close eye on Max Clark because I like the guy. I had heard previously the Tigers weren't very big on him, and they still may not be. Like again, they're working him out because he's a top draft prospect. They're going to look and see what they think. I think it's good that these high school kids, Jenkins and Clark, man. I hope they take a long, long look at them, and people smarter than me determine, you know, are they going to be better long term than Wyatt Langford? I don't know the answer. There are people who are paid a lot more money to make that decision, and I think you need all the information you can possibly have.
I mean, I always like to play this game. Who benefits by this getting out? Who benefits? I was
Yeah,
like, Clark benefits. It's always good to say hey, I'm working out at five, with the team that has the third overall pick. Because I think most have him as the fifth ranked prospect, right around there. So it wouldn't be a reach, it just whatever. It's right in the range. Uh, it benefits him, but then the team, you could do that, and you and your journalism judgment could put that out there and deem it newsworthy if you wanted to. But they came to you, but they wouldn't go to Jason. That would not be the mechanism to do so. So that does it benefit the Tigers? I mean, I guess they're not really playing anybody by by leaking that you're working out Max Clark. And could it be we actually like these high school guys and we just want to float it out there that we've been interested for a while? Maybe, I don't know. But I couldn't really find a big, oh, this is who wanted this out for this
yeah.
reason.
I don't know where it came from. I'm not sure.
But there was also another idea that's been floated out there is the wild card, or and maybe the term is disruptor
Yeah.
of the draft is, of course, a catcher. Just like we mentioned Henry Davis a couple last episode, I believe. Yeah, and now Kyle Teel, catcher out of Virginia. Is it Kyle Teel? Yes, Kyle Teel,
Hmm.
catcher out of Virginia, is kind of being floated out there by people saying this guy might be the disruptor. We think we know what's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I don't think he's a consensus top five in the mocks. Uh, but he could go as high
No.
as one. He could go as high as two. Could the Tigers look at their long-term catching situation and think we need a stud here and take him at three? And I think that idea is worth talking about. So I don't, as much as your fellow Amarilla brother Jake Rogers is entertaining and so fun to watch behind the plate, and he's got could get 20 home runs this year, worth of pop. And Eric Haas is a hometown kid, and you love his story, and he's productive. I don't think anyone would confuse the Tiger situation as long term stable. I think that's fair to say. And the theory of drafting Kyle Teel, this guy would have been probably a third round pick if he came out of high school. He was right around there. He might have gone up to the second, maybe, but that was also 2020. Obviously, a weird time for the draft. He opted to go to college instead. And he's been a day one starter for Virginia. There's some argument to be made. I wouldn't make it. I wouldn't stake like my podcast reputation or certainly my job as a president of baseball ops on it. There's an argument to be made in the value of taking Kyle Teel. And I personally like, am I setting this guy up for failure? I feel like the Kyle Teel conversation reminds me of what I thought about Jackson Jobe at the time, where it's like, I wouldn't do it. I see the reasoning. It's not for me, but I get why you went that path. Uh, that's Kyle Teel to me, and I think he probably projects as like more safe than Jackson Jobe was, obviously being a prep pitcher. But what do you think? What do you think about like the possibility of taking a catcher third overall there? Because you would have to really sell it to this fan base.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. If this is something the Tigers are seriously considering, and I have not individually heard that, then they need to start selling it hard. They need to sell it to me a little more than they have so far. It seems to me like sounds like a deal. You know, sometimes these get out. Probably one scout was watching Kyle Teel hard and came away and said, "Hey, I really like Kyle Teel," and then that turns into Tigers are heavily interested in Kyle Teel, which like I don't know. There's a whole organization making these decisions, and sometimes they're dissenting voices. Teal does feel like the guy, you know, his stock's rising. I think there are other teams who've had the same thought a little bit. Does feel like a guy who could be the disruptor. And we talked last week. There tends to be a disruptor here in the MLB draft. But if I'm the Tigers, man, I don't think you overthink this one. I think in a different draft class, it'd be an easier sell. A class that wasn't the Tigers are going to have the option probably to take a really good college hitter or the best pitching prospect in a decade, or two prep outfielders who might have a higher ceiling than the really polished college hitter. Like let's just not talk ourselves out of that. To get a catcher who's kind of mixed reviews on his bat. I mean, he can hit, but you know, and he raked this year for Virginia. But I like to look at Cape Cod League stats. He only had 29 at bat plate appearances, but he hit 125. Cape Cod, you're facing great competition. You're using a wood bat. His sophomore year at Virginia, he hit 276. Like, I think there's enough question in his bat. If you read the scouting reports, it's kind of like, okay, how much power does he actually have? We're not sure. And I just think this is too strong of a draft to try to pull off any tricks such as this.
Analytically speaking, I don't know. Do we even value catchers like that? I know Davis went number
I
one.
would guess like the thought is it's so hard to get a catcher, right? That there is a lot of equal value if you feel like you can draft a guy who's going to be a 3 or 4 wing catcher, like maybe you have to do it. Whereas, yeah, you can get a 3 or 4 win outfielder other places. That's probably the thought from like an analytical perspective. But kind of back to the Jackson Jobe conversation, if you're going to do that, you better be sure. You know, like you had to be sure Jackson Jobe was going to be an ace. You better be sure Kyle Teel is a franchise level catcher, not just an everyday type guy. And that's where I come back to, yeah, it's easier to find like a corner outfield bat, but also if you have 3 guys who are going to be above average big leaguers and you're going to pass on them for the hope that this catcher is the real deal, I think that's an unnecessary risk. I think that is almost I think that's overthinking it, much as though it seems the Tigers did in the Jackson Jobe draft.
I do have a piece of advice for Scott Harris is that if you are just in love with Paul Skeens and you are going to make this, he's available, you're going to make this pick and you know how it's going to play, you're not dumb, announce him as an outfielder. Because the guy can actually rake. Like, he could, you just do the Torkelson thing where you just announce him as a different position. so that which I still maintain that they did that so they wouldn't be the first team to take a first baseman number one
Oh,
overall.
absolutely. And that
Yeah,
and that was like also a war thing. Like he'd technically be more valuable if he can play third. And I was never as critical as some. Like I don't think it hurt to try that. And they tried it and it didn't work. And now
right.
Torkelson plays first in the big leagues. And
Like we all knew he would.
like we all knew he would. And now the question is like, can he even hit enough to like justify being a first baseman? So it was all like that was a little example of like trying a little too hard to be cute, probably. Maybe we should stop doing that.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. So the Teal thing, like I said, I would get it, wouldn't do it. Uh, I guess I have to look at the high school kids a little bit more. Like, is there going to be an announcement of Walker Jenkins, getting worked out, or in the combine coming up, or did it already happen?
Yeah, and I don't even know who actually goes to that. I'm not sure. The MLB draft combine seems like MLB trying to be too cute to like generate more interest in its draft.